my senior year, and I started to develop this like lump in my throat. And I couldn't, it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and I couldn't swallow right, and I couldn't eat right, and I couldn't, well, I could always drink, who am I kidding? I couldn't eat right. I lost a lot of weight. I couldn't sleep right. I either slept a lot or I'd sleep, but I wouldn't feel rested, and I didn't sleep right. It was just, and I was tearful, and I couldn't concentrate, and I couldn't do anything, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. And my friends were tired of me because I wasn't any fun. I was kind of morose. They were sick of it, so I isolated more and more too. So I really had no idea what was going on with me. No idea. And for whatever reason, I hadn't started to see Roger when I got back to school senior year, so I wasn't seeing him. And it was just getting worse and worse. And I took 2 incompletes, and we broke for Thanksgiving. And when we came back from Thanksgiving, we heard the news that a classmate of ours, Kitty Huffman, had killed herself, and she was also seeing Roger. Our school didn't do anything for us. I was a chemistry major, she was a biology major. We would see each other often in the science building. It was a small college, we all knew each other. But nothing. And in fact, not too long ago, I contacted the college because I wanted to get the correct spelling of her name, because I wanted to make a donation to Active Minds in her name, and they didn't have any record of her. So it was a few weeks after that. I was down at the college bookstore, whatever, getting my mail, and I ran into Roger. And we looked at each other, and I think we both had the same first automatic thought, which was, you look like hell. Because he did, and I know I did. And he looked at me and he's like, Heidi, how are you? Where have you been? How are you? And I looked at him, and for whatever reason, I answered him honestly. And I said, I don't know, Roger. I'm just not doing too well. And he looked at me and he's like, well, why haven't you been to see me? And I said, well, And he's like, well, no, I don't know. I said, well, with Kitty and everything, I figured you had enough going on. You didn't want to be bothered by me. You didn't need that, too. And he looked at me, and his eyes welled up with tears, and he said, oh, Heidi, I don't want another Kitty. Please come back. And I did. And he helped me, and I got through it, and I just cannot say enough about Roger Knudsen, our college psychologist. I just can't. He really, really helped me. And, so then I thought, I know what the problem is. The problem is I didn't move far enough away from home. I need to move further from home. So I took a job that was 2 hours away near Princeton, New Jersey. It was called Plainsboro, and it was very aptly named. It was flat and plain. And I didn't know anybody. And it was a new job, and it was my first job, and I just didn't count on the fact that I would be moving with me. Because there I was, I moved with me. Nothing changed. I still loathed myself. I still couldn't stand to be alone with myself. I had a drink rather than to tolerate any time alone with myself. It was all that, none of that changed. I just added more stressors on everything. I got back together with I had a boyfriend in college who liked to drink as much as I did. We got back together, and that helped, although, again, we would literally count pennies for gas money at times, but we always had money for booze. So at least we had our priorities straight, And then along the line, and then I started to get sick a lot. Well, it was all at the same time. I was getting sick a lot. I would get strep throats a lot. And in between that time, I also started an affair with a married man. Now, again, if you're having self-esteem issues, this is not a wise move. It is not a real ego booster when you have to sneak around and hide in the back seat and stuff like that. It really doesn't do a lot for your self-esteem. So I'm having this affair, I'm getting sick a lot, and I realized that, and my mother says, I'm coming down, take you to the doctor, going to the doctor with you. So she came and she went to the doctor with me, and she said, Doctor, I want to ask you something. He's like, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say she needs tonsils out and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, doctor, that's not what I'm going to say. She's depressed. She needs a psychiatrist. She needs a referral. Now, I didn't argue with my mother when I was feeling good. I certainly wasn't going to argue with her with a sore throat and 102 fever. So the doctor looked at me and was like, is this true? And I was like, whatever. So he gave me a referral to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist put me on antidepressants. And I really felt, initially it was horrible. I changed jobs. I had an hour commute on the train. And those first 6 weeks until the antidepressants kicked in was hell. I would cry every night on the way home from work thinking, because you had the side effects, but you didn't have any of the benefits yet, and it was just hard. But eventually they started to kick in. The man I was having the affair with, his wife found out about us, and so he moved in with me. And whatever friendship or love that we had moved out. And in no time, he was abusive. And for some reason, he hated my antidepressants. He called them my happy pills. And whenever we had a fight, which was almost all the time, he would get the pills and he would just throw them across the apartment, and I would have to crawl on my hands and knees and pick them up every time. I managed to convince him to go to counseling, and we went to counseling. It came out that he hit me. So she said, no hitting. When you get angry, just go for a walk. So that was the deal. So one night he got angry again, and he went for his walk, and I thought, okay, I have to hide the pills. I have to hide the pills. Where can I hide the pills? I gotta hide the pills. I know, I'll hide them in my mouth. So I took them all, and I put them in my hand, and I put them in my mouth, and I thought, wow, that was a lot easier than I thought it would be. And I had my hand on my glass of wine, and I stood there, and I thought, well, this would do it. This would do it. And I stood there. Yeah. But he's going to come back. And he's going to figure it out sooner or later, probably sooner. And then he's going to take me to the hospital. And then I'm going to get my stomach pumped. And everybody says how horrible it is to get your stomach pumped. And then I'm going to have to go to the hospital, like an institution or something, and I'm not at this job very long, so what are they going to think? They're probably going to fire me. I can't live through that. Yeah, I can't do it. So I heard him coming up the steps, and I spit him out, and I hit him, and, I just went on like, okay, everything's fine, hunky-dory, nothing happened. But luckily for me, I had an appointment with my psychiatrist for my med check the next day. And not med check, this was back in the days when you could actually go to the psychiatrist for therapy. So I saw him the next morning, and I had to say, I need a new prescription And he's like, why? And I told him what happened. I said, well, because I couldn't get, it was kind of like all congealed together, and it was hard to pick out two distinct pills, So I had to tell him. And he's like, so I told him what happened, and he did two things. One, he wrote a prescription for only 15 days. And two, the next day, he called me at work. Wasn't even a 5-minute conversation, maybe 2 minutes. Hi, Heidi, this is Dr. Cantor. Just want to see how you were doing. Is everything okay? Are you doing all right? Just checking in. That was it. But do you know what? That phone call meant the world to me. That phone call, how many years later, and I still remember that he did that in that phone call. And that's all it took. 2 minutes. It was amazing. I met the man who would now be my husband, so I thought, okay, now I'll be great, And he liked to drink as much as I did, but he started to have health problems. So he had to stop drinking. And again, I thought, well, that's it. I just needed the right man in my life, good feminist that I am, But I thought, that's it. Now that I'm married, I'll be happy. Everything will be okay. And I was happy, and don't get me wrong. But I was also struggling with depression. Because even though I had been on antidepressants, like any, good depressed person, as soon as I start feeling better after a long enough time, I stopped taking them. My psychiatrist moved out of town, and I got a new psychiatrist who kept falling asleep in our sessions. Again, not a real ego booster when you're having problems. And so I thought, well, you know what? I don't need to go to a psychiatrist anyway, and I'm happy. I'm married. I don't need medication, so I stopped taking it. So, and then I got to the point where I realized I knew I was an alcoholic. I knew I was an alcoholic. And I knew it had to be something big that would make me stop drinking. I knew I couldn't do it on my own. And when my husband had to stop drinking, I couldn't very well sit and drink under his nose. I just felt like that would be cruel and unusual punishment. I couldn't do that. So I couldn't stop for myself, but I could stop for him. And initially, it was for him, but in time it became for me. But I remember thinking, there must be something inside of me that wants to live, or I wouldn't be getting sober. And I certainly didn't feel it. I didn't connect to it or anything, but I thought there's got to be. So that's what I clung on to for a long time. And, with depression left untreated, it comes back. And and I'm still suicidal all through this too. So eventually I just said, I knew it was coming. I think sometimes that the reason why I have trouble getting old is because I never thought I'd get to be this old. I never thought I would be as old as I am now, never. So I developed Lyme disease. I was disabled for 3 years. We were having marital problems, majority my fault. It was like, I felt like it was just all going to hell. It was just, my life was crumbling down around me. And I thought, you know what, I did everything I know how to do. I'm sober. I do gratitude lists, and sometimes they help, but sometimes they make me feel worse. I can't even be an alcoholic in recovery, right? I mean, how messed up is that? And I had just reached the point where I had a plan, and I had a backup plan, and I had a backup plan of the backup plan. And I was just waiting for the right time and place. And I almost did it one day, but then my dog got sick, so I had to take her to the vet. And another day, my husband came home early unexpectedly, and that sort of thing. So I was just waiting for the time. And then my brother Jeff killed himself. Now, we did not have the greatest relationship, and I didn't know. I mean, we were making baby steps towards each other, but we just, it was, I didn't even, when he died, I wasn't even sure if I still loved him or not. And I felt like someone came up behind me with a 2x4 and whacked me on the back of my head, and I was leveled. And all I could think was, if I'm feeling this way, and I'm not sure I still love him, what on earth must his wife be feeling? What on earth must his 2 little children be feeling? What must his coworkers, his friends, what must all these other people, what must they be feeling? And then I realized that, they say alcoholism is the only disease that talks to you, tells you, you don't have it and things like that. I thought, you know what, that's not true. Mental illness talks to you too. In my brother's case, bipolar disorder. In my case, depression. And it tells you things like they're better off without you. They'll get over it. They don't care anyway. And you believe them. Because I'm sure that's what Jeff was thinking, because that's what I thought. But if he were alive, I could have told him, you were wrong. You're wrong. We're not going to get over this. This isn't okay. It's not the truth. And then I realized, if it applies to him, guess what? It's got to apply to you too. Again, I didn't feel it, I didn't think it, I didn't believe it, but I now had the evidence in front of me to show me that that was the truth, that suicide was no longer an option for me. I wish I could say that from that moment on, things were like, woohoo! My life changed and it was wonderful. It wasn't. Nothing changed, except now I couldn't kill myself, and I was not a happy camper. I felt like William Styron said in his book, Darkness Visible, I was sentenced to life. That's exactly what I felt like. Eventually, I did sink into another major depression. My husband came to visit me. I was disabled, and I was getting my hair done. He came at lunchtime with a cafe mocha and says, hi, sweetie, how are you doing? How are you doing today? And I burst into tears. And he's like, oh, we're having a good day, aren't we? But he looked at me and he said, Heidi, I can't stand to see you in such pain. It hurts me to see you like this. Will you please get help? Because he knew that I wouldn't do it for myself. I felt as insignificant as a speck of dust. I wasn't going to care. I don't care about myself. But he knew I cared about him, and he knew I would do it for him, and I did. I went to a drug study at University of Penn. I got on an antidepressant, a drug trial. There, the doctor said, if you are on the placebo, we will get you off of it. I promise you that no matter what, we will get you help. For the first time in I don't know how long, I had a glimmer of hope. He was the first person to ask me, are you suicidal? Do you have a plan? Do you have this? To talk about it freely and openly was like, oh my God, because I couldn't go up. I couldn't go up to my husband and say, guess what, sweetie, I want to kill myself. I felt ashamed. This is not something you want to, brag about. I felt defective. So to have someone finally ask me was just such a relief. We're finally getting this out in the open. So I got antidepressant, and it literally changed my life. My thinking changed, my outlook changed, everything changed. And I feel like I was then able to get into more intense therapy to deal with the issues that I had to deal with. And for the first time, finally, I was also correctly diagnosed. Turns out I have dysthymia and major depressive disorder. So when my friends said I wasn't any fun, they were right. And then I also had PTSD, which I didn't know, which also explained a lot of things too. So everything should have been going great, but I still wanted to kill myself at times. And I got involved in suicide prevention, and then I felt like a hypocrite because I'm still thinking about killing myself. I know I can't, but I still want to. And I met Dr. Ken Tallis, and he said, do you think, at a SPAN conference, and he said, do you think that people can get addicted to suicide? And like the light bulb went off in my head, and I realized that I was using suicide like I used a drink. As a crutch, when everything else fails, I can always kill myself. And it helped me to think about it and everything. So once I realized that that's what I was doing, I had the tools to deal with addiction. I could just now apply them to this. And my life just, again, changed completely. I think it's been a part of me for so long that I'll always have a part of me that is that way. When I get stressed, I still develop the automatic thinking, I'm a piece of crap, I should die, I want to die, But I know what to do now. I can combat them. I have my own safety plan. I challenge the thoughts. I recognize the automatic thinking. I take care of myself. I try. I gave up drinking and smoking. I'm not giving up chocolate under any circumstances ever. I try to exercise, walk, connect with nature, things like that. But I treat it as a chronic illness just like my depression is a chronic illness. And I didn't really get better with my depression until I accepted that as an illness too. So that's my story. And what I want to do, because I feel like, is just tell you some of the risk factors that can help make someone suicidal. And they are mental disorders, mood disorders. Like I said, there's a history of bipolar disorder in my family. There's also a history of substance abuse disorder on both sides of my family. So we kind of had double whammies. And that hopelessness, that sense that nothing's going to get better. Just, like I said, when I saw Dr. Amsterdam and he gave me that glimmer of hope, I cannot tell you what that meant to me. It was the first time in ages that I felt that way. Impulsive or aggressive tendencies, I think, especially among younger people. There's nothing like the predictor of a future event than a previous event. So a person who has attempted before is at higher risk for suicide. My mother's brother killed himself. He was over in Germany. I thought that had nothing to do with us, but now I know that put our family at elevated risk for suicide. And of course, if you don't have any, my brother was fired the day before he lost his job. Took his life. So a significant loss. And it can be a loss of a relationship.